I have a little bit of a different worldview. I believe that the world is headed towards the edge. Not that the cloud is not going to continue to expand and become absolutely mission critical, like that is clearly happening. But a lot of the data is going to the edge. And Gartner says by 2025, 75% of all data is going to be generated at the edge. And nobody is solving that problem. And those problems are critical. They're literally, in many cases, life and death. They impact billions of dollars. Many of them were not solvable because there wasn't Starlink, there wasn't internet in those locations, but now there is. We're fortunate because we had some top investors that were involved in creating Armada, Trey Stevens at Founders Fund, Justin Fischer-Wolfson and Alex Jacobson and Christian Garrett at 137 Ventures. They saw this at the very beginning, and then other people, as we started talking about it, Lux, the team at Shield, including Rod Shaw, Ray Rothrock, they had all seen a lot of the problems that I had been talking about, and then they had seen that these are not like nice to haves. These are the biggest problems in the world, and nobody is solving them. We can enable all of these other technology companies that have built really innovative software and AI applications to actually run those applications in these remote areas. And the customers already want to do that. They've never had the infrastructure to enable that.
Hello and welcome to 100, a podcast that takes you inside the most promising hypergrowth startups in a conversation with the founders themselves at the helm. Our goal is to give you the inside story alongside empirical analysis of a notable tech company that you might want to join. I'm your host, Usman, the author of the Why You Should Join newsletter. For those tuning in, welcome to 100, where every week we sit down with the founders of some of the most notable hypergrowth startups. As always, my name is Usman. I'm one of the authors of Why You Should Join and the host of the podcast. Today's company, Armada, is a full-stack edge computing company for industrials and defense. They currently have dozens of customers across the private and public sector. Not to mention, they've raised over $100 million to date, with their most recent round being led by M12 and past rounds involving Founders Fund, Lux Capital, Shield Capital, and 8VC, just to name a few. I'm super excited to be chatting with Dan Wright, the company's founder and CEO. Dan, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive into it. The one-liner of what you guys provide is full stack edge computing for industrials and defense. The question then is, how do you offer that? What does this product look like concretely?
Yeah, great question. So we are edge as a service. And what that means is anything you need, one-stop shopping at the edge. We're your partner for all of that. We take away all of the complexity around how do I get infrastructure in place? How do I figure out my connectivity? How do I figure out my AI for different types of workflows that I'm trying to automate or streamline? We take away all that complexity and it's just one-stop shopping. It just works at the edge.
Awesome. And so what shows up to the customer's doorsteps, or I guess site in this case, since you're dealing with industrials and defense? Like what does that product look like that they're receiving?
Yeah. So the thing to know about Armada is we are different from most startups in the sense that we are full stack, which is very ambitious on the one sense, but on the other hand, it's very much what customers need to actually get value from technology at the edge, because at the end of the day, the people that are working in oil rigs, mines, or on battlefields, they're not IT people, right? They're people that are trying to do a job and do it better using the latest technology. And so it needs to be plug and play and easy to use. So for us, there's a hardware component, which is a modular data center, which is called a Galleon, sticking with the Armada theme. And these can be as small as one rack, they can be as large as several racks, and they are delivered on site in a ruggedized shell that's military grade, designed for the harshest conditions in the world. And so that is the thing that physically shows up at these sites. And then again, it's just plug and play. So one way I like to describe it for people is it's AI in a box anywhere in the world. And it also includes all of the connectivity that you need. So typically there's, Starlink, and there might be even another satellite ISV that people are using for backhaul. And then there is a private 5G connection to ingest sensor data. But again, all of this is part of one physical box, which we call a Galleon, that's delivered on site. And then it's managed centrally across lots of different sites using our software operating system, which is called Commander. And so you can see all of your Galleons all over the world, along with any other connected assets you have, like Starlink terminals, cameras, sensors, drones, manage it all from one place.
Awesome. So we'll definitely dive into that because it seems like there's a lot more that you guys are offering than just the compute in the box. But maybe to just for those who may not be so familiar with, what the day to day for an average industrial or defense company looks like, why do they need sort of this edge compute, sort of this box that they can use? Like, what are some applications they're running or using you guys for?
Yeah, this was what I dug into before I started the company. Like, why are they, what problems are they trying to solve that they can't solve? And what I found out is when you talk to, like, take a major energy company, major oil and gas company, or a mining company, they are already trying to solve different problems at the edge, but they're running into blockers because they don't have the infrastructure to do it, or because the infrastructure is like totally disjointed, totally disconnected from the AI, from the IoT, and they don't have the ability to manage all of that on these sites, or certainly to do it at any level of scale. And so by putting the infrastructure there, you're enabling not like one use case, but many, many different use cases. And examples would be safety, monitoring. We have an application which is called Ops Safety that monitors for proper protective gear. Are people stepping in restricted zones that are very dangerous? Are they violating rules or regulations? Because a lot of these industries are very heavily regulated. And with modern AI models, along with large amounts of unstructured data that are being generated from cameras and drones and sensors in these remote locations, you can figure all that out in real time and then cause alerts before the bad thing happens, before somebody gets hurt, causes a rig to shut down, before there's any sort of mine disaster, before the defective product that's coming off the manufacturing line comes off the line. You can do that. And typically they're also looking to automate things that people are doing manually. So another example would be there's an application which is called Edge Narrate, and Edge Narrate. It takes sensor data and data from cameras and drones and creates a report of everything notable that happened that day automatically, versus what happens today. Take like an oil rig in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. You're having helicopters come out twice a day and circle the rig, and this is required by law. You have people whose whole job is to manually prepare these well reports, and now you can automate, a very large percentage of that work and just have a human sort of check it, fine tune it, check the AI's work. And I think that is increasingly what we're seeing a lot of these companies do. It's not that there's not a human in the loop, there is a human in the loop, but AI is just making them much more productive and also avoiding, avoidable errors, and making everything a little bit more real time. And then, another example would be if you take different processes, like people want to automate and do continuously, like 24 hours a day. So, for example, we have a partnership with Landmark Halliburton, the big oil and gas company. And in that case, there's lots of different companies all over the world that have rigs in the middle of the ocean, and they're looking to do autonomous drilling 24/7, 365. You can run those applications, which have already been built, and Halliburton's been at this for over 100 years, so they know this space inside and out. But they've never had the infrastructure to do this at these remote edge locations, and now we're enabling that.
Wow. So not only does your guys' product sort of solve the problem for many, which is like they're doing things manually, literally hopping into a helicopter, flying around, but you can also, what I'm hearing is also enable a lot of other automations that maybe they hadn't even considered since it wasn't possible to have this compute on the edge.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's kind of like bring a lot of the benefits of the what people have thought of as the cloud to these more remote areas. We can enable all of these other technology companies that have built really innovative software and AI applications to actually run those applications in these remote areas. And the customers already want to do that. They just, again, they've never had the infrastructure to enable that.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, we're going to dive into these applications a little bit deeper and, exactly who's building them, how much you guys are helping. But even before then, you brought up the cloud, and my mind kind of goes to like sort of a fundamental question there, which is you guys are obviously offering edge compute, but why that? Like why the decision to focus on edge, especially where kind of in a layman approach, it seems like the world's headed towards the cloud. Why not just give them the connectivity and then stop there?
Yeah, great question. I think I have a little bit of a different worldview. I believe that the world is headed towards the edge. Not that the cloud is not going to continue to expand and become, absolutely mission critical. Like that is clearly happening. But a lot of the data is going to the edge. And Gartner says by 2025, 75% of all data is going to be generated at the edge. In addition to that, you've got Starlink bringing connectivity to all these remote locations around the world, rural parts of Africa and South America and really all over the world, the oceans, right? The North Sea. All of a sudden, all these places are getting connected that were never connected. And then on top of that, you've got in the wake of ChatGPT, people thinking, how do I actually apply AI to operations? And so you're seeing more of these initiatives. Some people call them Industry 4.0. Some people call them, just frankly, AI in operations or digital transformation in operations. But the idea is all the same, which is how do I take those latest and greatest solutions, AI enabled solutions, and run them where all my data is. And all the data again is at the edge. So that's what we're enabling.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've sort of thought through this for a very long time and probably get probed on this a lot. But just to humor me a bit here, I completely see the point, right? Of sort of all these new applications and Starlink doing a great job of bringing connectivity to just parts of the world that never existed before. And you guys have also built this whole operating system that goes even beyond like the actual compute, right? Like you're helping them manage all these different resources. What are like some like maybe concrete reasons as to why you still want the compute there, right? Which is if they do have the connectivity through Starlink, why not send it back to your guys' server somewhere and you guys can run all these applications for them? Are there some tangible reasons where like, hey, like, yeah, we could do that, but it's just not as good as having the compute there?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few reasons. So one is just latency. And a lot of the applications that we're focused on are very latency sensitive. And just take a few of the examples, safety. If you get alerted that there is a safety issue, but it's hours or even days late, that's not very helpful, right? Real time emissions monitoring, which increasingly everybody's focused on. How do I monitor, rigs and pipelines, for emissions? Or, think about it in the defense or disaster response scenario, which is another big focus of ours. If I'm on, a ship or a remote battlefield, or if I'm responding to a hurricane, and obviously it's been horrific what's happened with the hurricanes in the southeast, and Armada's actually been very involved helping with that in partnership with Skydio and Starlink and others. But in those situations, those kind of life and death or decisions that impact billions of dollars, you can't have any latency, and so that's a huge point. By bringing the compute to the data where the data is generated, by bringing the AI to the data where it's generated, you are eliminating the latency. It's like a thing of the past. There is no latency. And secondly, you're doing it in a way that is way more cost effective, because trying to send all that data to some remote data center is actually extremely expensive to do. And the third is that it's actually much more secure to process it locally. And then you also layer on things like data residency, where a lot of these organizations, they can't, you know, transfer data beyond their borders for different types of state, government. And so we're helping with all of those things. And then we're doing it in a way that is very complementary to the cloud. I mean, you mentioned earlier that the cloud is, you know, transforming a lot of different types of companies and also in the public sector. We are all in on that. And so, like, Microsoft, for example, led our last round. They're a strategic partner. If somebody wants to work with us, one, they can use any of their Azure credits to buy our products. So Microsoft has made it really easy to buy Armada. But then also, they can do all the processing that they want locally, but they can send all the metadata back to Azure or any other cloud that they would like. And so again, these things are very complementary, but by processing more of the data locally, you're just able to solve the latency problem, the cost problem, and the security and data residency problems.
Yeah. And those problems are always important. I think sometimes in the world of like just SaaS products, we overlook just how critical those things are. Like, especially if you're dealing with like defense use cases, that security point is probably just a deal breaker. There's no way around that. Yeah. You brought up sort of, emergency responses. You also mentioned, what's been going on with the hurricanes here at home, which has been absolutely devastating and terrible. You did mention Armada is helping out, and I too have sort of on the news at least been seeing like Elon Musk with Starlink and sort of all that they've been doing to help out. But I wasn't familiar Armada was in the mix as well. I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit more. Like, how are you guys involved in that effort? How is Armada helping things?
Yeah, so we had already, before the hurricanes, been very focused on disaster response and disaster readiness, and that's in the public sector. So we're working already. We just had a customer story go out with the state of Alaska Department of Transportation to help with response to, for example, avalanches. And what they're doing is they're using Starlink combined with Skydio drones, combined with our full stack compute to process, data at the edge for real-time response to avalanches, and then Starlink is providing the connectivity. And now what you're seeing is that extend to, other scenarios. And when the hurricanes, were coming, we talked to Skydio, to Adam over there, their CEO, and we talked to Starlink, to some senior execs there, and we said, hey, what can we do to help? And then we collectively reached out to a lot of these organizations, and we said, hey, we're here. And we would send this stuff and say, hey, we want to help right now. Like, don't worry about, like, it's kind of bad business, I guess, but maybe it's good business. So we said, like, don't worry about payment. We'll figure that out later. We want to help. And we just dove in. And those organizations are also very mission driven, like Armada. And so they just did the same exact thing. And so we were there, with the first responders in Asheville, first responders on the ground in several different areas. And that is very much where we want to be, is like when an emergency happens, when there's a crisis, Armada is here to help. But it also underscores the need to have something that just like works out of the box and can be deployed very, very quickly wherever those disasters strike. Because in that situation, you can't, again, you're not going to have IT people on site. You can't be like, hey, how do these things all work together? It's like, no, it needs to be plug and play and just work. And so those are the type of applications we're focused on. And then in the DoD, that's another big focus for us, where you can imagine, right, with given what's going on in the world, things change in an instant. You need to be able to enable the warfighter with real-time intelligence at the edge, using all of their data from drones. And increasingly, wars are being fought with drones, and that's only going to continue, as well as counter drone, technology like Anduril's Roadrunners and others. And so what we're enabling is we can process whatever data you want, run any application you want at the edge. And even if you need to fly this into a remote battlefield, you can put a Galleon into a C-130, you can drop it on a truck, and you're good to go. So it's perfect for those types of scenarios.
Yeah, this is a super like nitpick almost question, but you just mentioned you can drop into a truck. I guess I never even asked how big is this Galleon? Like, what are we talking here?
Yeah, think about a Galleon as, again, edge as a service. So it comes in different sizes depending on what the use case is or use cases are. So you can have a 40-foot Galleon that has 5 racks of compute. It comes kitted out with all of your latest GPUs. It comes with your Starlink, maybe another, satellite ISV, and it also comes with a private 5G. That's a pretty common skew that we see with a lot of different types of, especially companies, also in the public sector, where you want some mobility because that can still go on the back of a truck. It can go on a ship and go on a train, lots of different ways to transport that. And it's optimized for mobility, but it also supports a lot of different workloads versus there's other scenarios where people say, no, my scenario is I actually need to take this thing in by helicopter or by plane. In the mobility is the most crucial thing. And maybe I have less workloads, or maybe I'm just looking to stack several of these things together. And so for that, you might use a 20-foot form factor that has a few racks of compute, still has your GPUs in there. And that's the form factor that you can literally put in the back of a C-130. You can take it, by helicopter. You can drop it on some island in the Pacific Theater or some remote, desert, and you're off to the races. And then the nice thing is that these things, again, they're highly ruggedized and they're designed to be permanently mobile, and so you can just move it from place to place as things change. And given the way things are going in the world, that's happening very quickly, so it's a nice feature.
Hey, 1 to 100 will be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. If you're building a B2B SaaS app, at some point your customers will start asking for enterprise features like SAML authentication, SCIM provisioning, role-based access control, and audit trails. That's where WorkOS comes in, with easy-to-use and flexible APIs that help you ship enterprise features on day one, without slowing down your core product development. Today, some of the hottest startups in the world are already powered by WorkOS. These include Perplexity, Vercel, Jasper, and Webflow. WorkOS also provides a generous free tier of up to 1 million monthly active users for user management, making it absolutely the perfect authentication and authorization solution for growing companies. It comes standard with rich features like bot protection, MFA, roles and permissions, and more. If you're currently looking to build SSO for your first enterprise customer, you should consider using WorkOS. Integrate in minutes and start shipping enterprise plans today.
Our sponsor for today's episode is Carta, the end-to-end accounting platform that's purpose-built to power the strategic impact of the fund CFO. For the first time ever, private fund operators can now leverage their very own bespoke software that's designed from the ground up to bring their whole portfolio together, enabling formations, transactions, and distributions to flow seamlessly and accurately. The end result? A remarkably fast and precise platform that empowers better strategic decision-making and delivers transformational insights on demand, timely K1s, holistic fund performance data, and so much more. Come see the new standard in private fund management at carta.com/investors. That's carta.com/investors.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And it's also really refreshing to hear your guys' stance on sort of the disaster response of just getting it out there and worrying about everything else later. I think it's no surprise to many that mission-driven companies like that actually, can put their actions behind their words will definitely succeed. So that's a big sign for Armada there. And then also, I think the point of it just being full stack and fully ready to go is also really amazing because, yeah, dealing with the IT during those moments are definitely something you can't really be doing. But on the note of sort of like full stack, you mentioned that, there's a compute, there's a connectivity, and you've given us like numerous examples now of like how people are, sort of using different applications or powering different applications using Armada. I'm curious, how much do you guys get involved at like the application level? Like, is the Armada team sort of building these applications as well, or is it, because I guess in theory that'd be full stack as well, right? Kind of getting involved in the actual application too.
Yeah. So we're doing both. So for certain scenarios where an application already exists, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, right? So if, a company in the private sector, like Halliburton is a good example, they've created applications already, or even some startups. Like we're working with a company called Metaspectral that does models focused on processing hyperspectral data for things like exploration and mining, right? So if there's already an app for a specific use case, we don't try and reinvent the wheel. There's other people that have built apps for, real-time methane emissions monitoring. Okay, well, let's just, embrace that. There's a company called Iconic Air that does that, Metaspectral, I mentioned, and there's others. And so that's one. The second thing is, if there's not already a solution, we have the team to build those applications. And we do have first party applications, some of the ones that I mentioned to you, ops safety, edge detect, edge narrate. Those are all first party applications that we built because the customer had a problem and nothing already existed. Same thing is true in terms of partnership in the public sector. So if you have an application that you want to run from, Anduril or Palantir or any other company, everything that we do enables you to run that at the edge, right? And then the third thing is, some companies or agencies, they already have their own models that they've built that they want to run at the edge. And so the cool thing about the way that we built our platform, there's a marketplace where again, it's one-stop shopping for the edge, but I can actually publish my own models to that marketplace. And then it's one click to deploy that on any of my Galleons anywhere in the world and run it. And if I want to even publish that for others to be able to buy, I can also do that.
Oh wow, you have an app store going.
Yeah, we're very much trying to enable as many customer problems as possible to be solved at the edge. And sometimes that means that we have to build at the application layer because nothing exists and we're the best people to do it. But if there's already something else that we can enable that somebody else has built, whether it's the customer or the partner, we're always, looking to do that.
Yeah. So a part of the offering, like when you're signing these big contracts, is sort of you building out stuff for them, or is this like I'm kind of trying to probe here more so on like the business model almost. Is most of the money being made on these applications, or is it being made on like selling the actual device with the connectivity and all of it working in one go?
No, most of the business is really focused on, again, the infrastructure and enabling these different workflows full stack. And even when we do something at the application layer, we're not like a services company that's going to like do a bunch of bespoke work. Like, we don't do that. What we do have is a set of prepackaged applications, though, that are taking the latest large language, multimodal, and predictive models, and then allowing customers to leverage those at the edge. But think about that in terms of like, those are very extensible across different industries and workflows. They're not like bespoke for one customer. If a customer has their own model, or they're partnering with somebody else that's built those applications for their very, unique situation, that's great. And we'll just enable that to run on our infrastructure, but we don't build those types of like kind of one-off apps, really.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned it yourself, you said the word extensible. I'm curious, like, yeah, how like what is the uniformity of these applications beyond like customers? Like, are there just a lot of really common use cases amongst all industrials and defense? Like, do you have any examples of these?
Yeah, they're very, very common use cases. Yeah. So, if you take like defense or emergency response, a lot of it centers on the use of unstructured data that's generated, in particularly by drones, right? So, more and more drones are generating just massive amounts of data, insane amounts of data in these remote locations. And people are looking to process that data locally, because trying to send all that data back to the cloud, it has all the issues around latency in particular, but also cost. So it's better to process it at the edge and send the metadata back to the cloud. That is a very common scenario across DoD, across, emergency response in the private sector, law enforcement in the public sector, I should say, in the public sector, law enforcement. And then also, in the private sector, say I'm building a new pipeline, I want drones monitoring those pipelines for safety issues, for emissions issues. Now I can do that at the edge. And then again, the nice thing about the Galleons is they're mobile, so I can move the infrastructure as these pipelines are being built. And the same thing is true in mining sites. Like, a lot of times they're doing exploration, and that process today takes, or has historically taken teams of people going out and manually surveying, large geographic areas to figure out where the best place is to mine. And it takes oftentimes years. By using drones combined with hyperspectral data and then AI models to process that data at the edge, you can speed that up to weeks, right? And you think about the ROI on a use case like that, it's just through the roof. And that's very repeatable, but it's not that different from the disaster response use case or the DoD use case. And then another big area that we see, and we'll be talking more about this, I mentioned this ops safety application. A lot of the scenarios that are like board level issues are around safety. If you and the reason is those are the scenarios that impact both the top line and the bottom line and actual human lives. If I have somebody get hurt on a remote oil rig or in a mining site, that thing's shutting down and I'm losing a lot of money. And on top of that, it's negatively impacting my cost and it's also negatively impacting my brand because those things, are going to be out there. And so those are the types of things that we're allowing people to get in front of. And the analogy I like to give on that is very easy for people to understand. It's like we're taking the black box on the airplane that people see after the airplane goes down, and then the regulators come and they say, "What happened?" And it's very reactive, and people are saying, "Yeah, this is what happened, and we have the data." We're taking that, but instead we're preventing the plane from going down in the first place because we're allowing you to use all that data to get in front of the big bad thing that could happen before it happens.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes complete sense. Yeah, I mean, almost as an aside here, I mean, you were kind of going through the industries and made me realize you've probably seen so many different like cool ways that Armada is being used. Like, what is the coolest way that you've seen? Like, where you're like, this is interesting. I didn't even know this happens in the world, but someone's doing this.
That's one thing I really love about Armada and I love about my job is I am working with what I think are some of the most interesting people in the world that are solving big problems at the edge and we're enabling them. And, again, take a mining company or take a big oil rig in the middle of the ocean or the middle of the desert. Take a person who's trying to do a job, focus on defense in the middle of the Arctic or the middle of the, Indo-Pacific. And we're enabling those people to use this type of technology to solve like mission critical problems. These are not like small problems that, you know, you might find entire companies being built around. We're enabling them to solve many different problems that are absolutely mission critical. And some of those are interesting because I mentioned that like people have been trying to solve those problems before Armada existed. They just haven't been able to, or haven't been able to do it at scale. And so one example I give people is that I've been to these mines, I've been to the oil rigs, I've been to, you know, some of these remote locations where people are trying to respond to disasters. And oftentimes people have some sort of build it yourself DIY solution, but it's like I've got a half rack in the rig man's house, I've got a half rack up on the the dog man's house where they're actually doing the drilling, but it's a fire hazard. I don't actually have any way to manage it at scale. I've got some GPUs shoved over here and they're trying to piece it together and they're quickly running into massive scale issues where they can't actually do what they're trying to do. And so we're actually solving this problem for them where they don't have to try to be IT people anymore and piece all this stuff together. And we're enabling it at, massive scale.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that I mean you just touched upon it a little bit here and I wanted to dive into it a little bit more, especially like sort of like the why now or like why you guys question. And especially I mean you brought up like the DoD, you've also brought up like some defense, right? I mean, here you guys have situations that are super mission critical. You have all the funding in the world you could probably need from the government to get these done. Why weren't they able to kind of solve this issue? Like what was it about you guys that was able to get this done whereas they weren't?
Yeah, I think for us, one is you have to really be focused on the problem. And I think especially if you're going to build full stack, you have to be focused on the specific problems that you're trying to solve. And that was one thing that we really focused on from the very beginning is work from the customer's most mission critical problems back, and then make sure that both from a technology standpoint and from a team standpoint, we're the best partner in the world to help them solve those mission critical problems. And I think that is one, it's just like focus. I think the second thing is just the team. And we are very focused on building what we think is the best team in the world, focused on the edge. And that's at every layer of the stack too. So we had to find the best, you know, infrastructure people, and our CTO, Pradeep, he helped build Azure at Microsoft for over a decade. We had to find the best AI talent, and our chief AI officer, Prag Mishra, he was the guy who did all the autonomous warehouse work at Amazon for over a decade, and is one of the leading minds on AI, and particularly AI in operations. And then at the hardware level, we had to find somebody who understood things like, how do I manage a very complex supply chain and make sure that I have a diversity of partners that can make sure that these things are available when they're needed. Because again, we're dealing with time sensitive, mission critical problems. They need to be available. And then I think the other thing is just the ability to get investors as well as the top talent and customers aligned around this mission and the vision for where the world is going. And I think people are really leaning into that because of what is going on at the world. And it comes down to those three things that I mentioned earlier, which is one, Starlink. I mean, it didn't exist 4 years ago, and now it's rapidly bringing internet to not just individuals but also companies, governments all over the world. Um, that's a game changer. In addition, you've got IoT exploding, including drones, and they're generating massive amounts of data in these remote locations. And then the third is, with the latest AI models, there's just more that you can do with that data than you could ever do in the past. And so I think we've done a lot of the things that we needed to do really, really well to unlock that opportunity. And then the timing with just everything going on in the world is also right to build a company like this. And so that's why we're succeeding.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes complete sense. The tailwinds I completely see. I'm curious. Would you say it's an accurate statement that you mentioned that, like, I mean, obviously people are doing edge compute before this, right? But we're maybe doing it in a much less efficient manner and not full stack. And like you mentioned, some GPUs over here, some over there, and some guys trying to wrangle them all together. Was the reason why they never really just put the money to, or like the time or the resources to kind of put it together into one full stack, was because it just wasn't like the main problem at their business? Or I am curious, like, why no one ever just made the thought that, like, hey, instead of this being so like patchy and hopscotch all over the place, why doesn't someone just sit down for some time and really make this full stack for us internally?
I mean, we're working with every day the largest, most important organizations in the world, the ones that form the backbone of our economy, the ones that are literally fueling, how we travel from place to place and many other things that we do in our lives. They're providing raw minerals to create many things that we want to create, and that, in the public sector, are literally keeping us safe and, creating a more peaceful, safe world to live in. All of those people at all of those companies, they are not focused on being IT companies, and they're not focused on just building this. They're focused on solving those problems at the edge. And so there was always going to be a gap where people were looking for a solution, but they were trying to piece many different things together, and they aren't focused on solving this full stack because they're focused on the other thing that's mission critical that they're trying to do. And so, like, we really felt like that the gap was, it had to be a partner that was going to do this. And we really believe that we are the best partner. We know we're the best partner, and we're extremely focused on enabling solutions to those big problems at the edge, working with, again, the leaders in those different spaces. And the thing that they have that is very helpful to us is they have all the subject matter expertise. So they know all of the different problems that they're trying to solve. They are experiencing them 24/7, 365. It's the thing that keeps them up at night. And then as they give us the information about those scenarios, many of the things we're able to partner with companies that are solving that, but just never had the infrastructure to be able to run those applications at the edge. Sometimes they have their own solutions, but they don't have the infrastructure to do it at the edge, and they need a partner for that. And then sometimes we just build it ourselves full stack, including the application to enable that.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to dive a little bit more into sort of your background, which is a very impressive one. You've led many huge projects before as well. Wanted to hear like, how did you sort of learn about this problem to solve, and like why, when and why was the decision made that like, hey, this is what I'm going to do next, and this is what I'm going to spend the rest of my life on per se.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've always been really sort of in love with is technology and specifically data. And then I wanted to solve problems that really matter in the world with data. And so if you look at my first company that I worked on, App Dynamics, it was all around digital transformation and the idea that all these companies are moving from just using their data sort of on-prem. They're using their data like in a brick and mortar location to do something, to all of that is moving online. All of that is moving to your phone. It's moving to, the internet. And so helping companies and public sector through that process was like very rewarding. And then the second company, Data Robot, was like, okay, now there's all this data that's being generated in all these different types of industries. And how do we actually create value from all of that data and enable our customers to create value from all that data? And so that was all around sort of an end-to-end AI platform that would enable AI at scale, and AI in a way where even if you weren't, highly trained data scientist, you could create value from your data. And if you were a highly trained data scientist, it gave you superpowers. It gives you superpowers because Data Robot is doing that. And then the thing that I realized through those experiences is that all the data is going to the edge, and nobody is solving that problem. And those problems are critical. They're literally, in many cases, life and death. They impact billions of dollars. Many of them were not solvable because there wasn't Starlink, there wasn't internet in those locations, but now there is. And on top of that, the data is just exploding there. And when I realized that, it was like I had to start Armada. I had to build this company because the problems are too important to be ignored. And for all the reasons that we just talked about, I didn't see anybody else that was going to be solving that problem anytime soon. And it wasn't something that can wait, years or decades to do. And so I felt, like a moral obligation to go solve that. And I think when you look at our team that we built, and you said it earlier, like we have a very mission driven company, that's like an unfair advantage for us. Like everybody who joins the company is all in to solve these big, impactful problems that really matter in the world versus, doing something else that might not be as impactful. And so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Before speaking with you, I was speaking to different people. I spoke to Grant, who's on your team, who shout out helped arrange a lot of this. He told me that you're very passionate about something that he called bridging the digital divide. And I wanted to hear from you, what is that, and what exactly are you passionate about there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that really drew me to the idea of Armada back before Armada was a company was some of my own, personal experiences where I have seen throughout my life that there's sort of this gap between people that are in areas where there is great infrastructure, there's great connectivity, there's great access to technology, and the rest of the world. And that, people think about like, when we had this conversation about the digital divide, you think about people in Africa, you think about people in the middle of the Amazon, some of these really more remote areas, but that's even large parts of the US. And I grew up in a small town that is like 2.5 hours driving outside of San Francisco. And when I was growing up there, it was hard to get good internet, and still in some areas out there, it's hard to get good internet. And if you look at other, large parts of the US, whether you're talking about, Appalachia or remote parts of, Ohio or Idaho or any of these, states, it's still like a pretty big gap. And I think that leads to a lot of downstream issues for the world, that if we can bridge that, you're creating opportunity for just millions, or actually billions of people that never had it. And those people could be, the next Steve Jobs. They could create, the next thing that's going to revolutionize technology. They could be the person that cures cancer. They could be the person who, figures out how do we, the next Elon Musk. Maybe the next Elon Musk is somewhere in, Africa. We don't know, right? And we're never going to know unless we actually bridge that digital divide. And so that is the mission of Armada. It's at the company level, but in the government level, but also at like a deeply individual level. And that is something that really motivates me day to day, and it motivates a lot of our employees and a lot of us, and me included. Like, I've been to a lot of these other remote locations, Africa, different parts of Latin America. I've seen these remote villages where people don't have the internet, they don't have infrastructure. And, if you enabled them, like, one, they'd get better education. So they'd get, better opportunity. They could, whatever, they want to do in terms of starting their own businesses online, they can do that. In terms of just getting access to cutting edge healthcare, you can do that. So the impact in terms of changing people's lives at the individual level, I mean, it's a very rare thing to our company. And what you're going to see more from us going forward is we're going to be talking about how we're doing that. We've been more talking about how we're helping these heroes solve big problems at the edge, but you're going to see us continue to talk about that, but also talk about how we're bringing the internet, in partnership with Starlink and some other organizations that we're going to be talking about. We're bringing internet to schools in remote villages around the world. We're bringing, cutting edge healthcare to where it's needed to these remote locations. And I think as we do that, it's going to continue to build this momentum around the company where people want to come work here. The best talent in the world wants to come work here. Customers want to work with us because they see that we're out to help the world and do something positive in the world. And, investors also want to be a part of it because that is the sort of thing that is real world impact that also can have a great business impact, but you're doing it while you're also helping a lot of people that need help around the world.
Yeah. Wow. That's truly amazing. That's awesome. I guess another question I had for you here is, this is honestly very, hard and big work. And this isn't your ordinary startup that I think you sometimes hear about in like the TechCrunch articles, right? Where there's some new AI agent doing something. I was curious, like, what are the unique challenges that you personally have faced? Like, what was the toughest part about making Armada come to life for you personally? I guess this is more of just like for historical cataloging of Armada. Like, what was it that made Armada so hard for you?
Yeah. I think one thing is that it's a very ambitious, hard thing to do. And so just convincing people that it's possible is the first thing. And that obviously includes investors. And we're fortunate that we have many of the top, investors in the world, Founders Fund, Lux, Fowler, many others that are backing the company. But then it's, okay, how do I convince the best talent in the world? And because what we're doing is hard, I couldn't settle for, you know, above average talent. I tell everybody who works at Armada, you have to be top 1% in the world at what you do. And you have to be all in the mission. And then we're going to have to work collectively, like very, very hard to make this successful. And we try to say that continuously on an ongoing basis, not just for the first 5 or 10 hires, but for every single person that becomes part of, we call them the Armada, the part of the team, right? And so we are very, very focused on that. And I'm a big believer that if you get the right team, you can do anything. I think if you look at what happened over the weekend with the Starship, launch, and my co-founder John was there, that's a good example of, like, people would have thought that was impossible not that long ago. I think there was a clip of Elon, saying that 15 years ago that they were going to try that, but who knows if it's possible, but they were going to try it. And that's kind of how I feel with Armada. Like what we're doing, a lot of people would say that's impossible, but if we have the best people in the world, it's not impossible. It's possible, and we'll do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned, some of the hard part of it, I mean, or is just getting people to believe. And, I remember hearing about Armada a while ago when, there was sort of a bit of a buzz with your guys' fundraising round, of like launching these. And you just mentioned how it wasn't always so easy on the inside convincing these investors. What's the trick? How'd you do it? How'd you get all these investors to sort of back you guys? And were they backing you guys before Armada was live or active, or was it once you guys were already operating, you went and got these investors?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're fortunate because we had some top investors that were involved in sort of creating Armada. Trey Stevens at Founders Fund, Justin Fishner Wolfson, and Alex Jacobson, and Christian Garrett at 137 Ventures. They saw this at the very beginning, and then other people, as we started talking about it, Shaheen Farshi at Lux, and Josh Wolf over there, the team at Shield, including Rod Shaw. Like the interesting thing is Ray Rothrock, they had all seen a lot of the problems that I had been talking about, and then they had seen the need, like that these are not like nice to haves. These are not like kind of problems, but they're not the top problems. These are the biggest problems in the world, and nobody is solving them. And then, the other thing that helped was that we were able to get a really incredible team to say, yeah, we're going to devote our lives to this, and in addition to me, my co-founder, John, who had taken Okta public, Pradeep, who I mentioned, who was one of the key people that built Azure at Microsoft, Prague, given his background, and you can go down the list. As that team came together, I think all these VCs, they could sort of pattern match. They could say, okay, I've seen that if you get a really world-class mission-driven team together, you can solve almost any problem. And it's really just a matter of getting the right people focused on the right thing. And then you put some capital to give some fuel to that, and you're off, right? And so that was really what made it happen. But we were fortunate to have backing from the best investors in the world, pretty much out of the gates.
Yeah. Final two questions for you. The first one being, what's next for Armada? What is the sort of the roadmap look for the coming year or two?
What's next is you're going to see more about some of these massive problems that we're helping solve at the edge. And you're going to hear it not just from us, but from our customers. I'm a big believer that they're also part of the Armada and a huge part of it. And they're the ones that are really bringing this change to these industries, to these core industries. They're bringing it to these life and death scenarios, whether you're talking about defense or you're talking about disaster response. And so we're going to be out telling a lot of those stories and really making them heroes, because I believe they are heroes and they deserve to be recognized like that. And then the other thing that you'll see from us is, as I was mentioning, while we're doing that, some of the impact that it's having at the human level, and talking about bringing connectivity, and data processing capabilities to these remote communities around the world that really, really need it. And the last thing I think that you'll see from us is we're going to move extremely fast. Like, one thing that we are really focused on is making progress in short amounts of time. And because we have a total clarity about what problems we're solving, it's much easier for us to do that. Like, nobody here is confused about what the mission of the company is. Nobody is confused about what problems we're out to solve. Like, we know what we're doing. And so now it's just how quickly can we do that? And you're going to see that across lots of different industries where we're solving the hardest problems, whether you're talking about those areas in the public sector, whether you're talking about, you know, oil and gas, mining, logistics, railroads, maritime, you name it, manufacturing, more problems that are being solved. And I think it's going to open people's eyes, because a lot of people aren't even aware of what's possible now with AI and in operations, but we're enabling some pretty exciting things. So stay tuned.
Yeah, awesome. And on the note of moving fast and getting a lot done, I'm curious, this has been quite the compelling pitch. For those listening who want to join Armada, what are you guys hiring for? Are you guys looking for someone? And if so, who listening should maybe start reaching out to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell everybody what I tell our team all the time. There's three criteria if you want to join our mission. One is you've got to be all in on that mission. Second is you've got to be top 1% in the world at whatever you do. And the third is you got to be willing to roll up your sleeves and work really hard, because we're all working really hard, and that's how we're going to get this done. And then if that's you, like, apply, come join the Armada. And what that means, we need lots of different types of technical talent. We need, engineers, we need product managers, we need, top AI talent. And then we also need people that have expertise in hardware and supply chain. So if you are best in the world at any of those things, like, please get in touch. We're also hiring on the go-to-market side. So if you are world class at being able to articulate and pitch compelling technology that solves important problems around the world, like, please get in touch. We're hiring across the board. And, I can't think of a more impactful time to build to join a company like Armada. So I tell everybody, like, the people who are joining now are going to get the benefit of, several years from now, when Armada is a household name, you'll be able to point back and say, hey, I built that. I built that. So come join us.
That's awesome. And quick note on that, what is the best way to reach you or the Armada team for those who may want to apply?
Yeah, I mean, you can just reach out either, to me. My email is just dw@armada.ai, or get in touch with, Grant, who's gg@armada.ai, and we'll just route you to the right people. And then also we have postings online on LinkedIn and lots of other areas. So feel free to apply that way as well.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time. As we heard, there's a lot going on and a lot of very important things you guys are working on. So I do appreciate you taking the time to do this. We wish absolutely the best for Armada and are super excited to see what the future holds for it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, really enjoyed the conversation and appreciate you just highlighting our mission, and look forward to talking again.
Yeah, awesome.